So as we think about that humanity, and we think about the fact that it connects all of us, we should think about that's why this wall and this endeavor is important. Many who still try to work through the issues that they were left with by the war will come and place flowers, a picture, a memento. That too will help us understand the humanity of what we're dealing with. And for those that do that, you need to understand that we will be here not only to learn, but to support you. And the real question that we have to ask ourselves is, will we fight on? Will we fight on to deal with issues like homelessness and substance abuse and unemployment? They never stop fighting, nor can we. We should be proud that we live in a state that leads the nation in benefits and support for our veterans. We should be proud that we live in a state in which every community is served by a veteran service officer, and we sure do have a phenomenal one in Susan Magner. And we should be proud and thankful that we still have the opportunity to help those who work through issues that came from the Vietnam War. My hope is together, as a community, as a state, and as a nation, we will never stop that fight. Because just as it is true that we should always honor our veterans, it is also true that we should also continue to work on their behalf. And remember, because there's a simple proposition here. We can't take back time. We can't turn back the clock as much as we would like to. We can do everything in our power today and every other day to make a difference in the lives of those that have been affected by the Vietnam War. That should be our solemn obligation. It is never too late to say thank you to a veteran. Never, ever, ever. And it is never too late to say the simple words, as we should say individually, as a society, and as a country, that we didn't say enough at that dark time in our history. To all of our Vietnam veterans, God bless you and welcome home. Thank you.
time. March. Ready? Toe. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Ready, go!
KIAs out of Lawrence. David Peter Bedrosian. Robert Francis Cody. Gerald Francis Curry. Randall Morris Denton. David Francis DeVoe. Lawrence John Ferrelli. Richard Joseph Gilbert. Joseph Thomas Guile Jr. Paul Daniel Giemond. Gregory Patrick Kent. Alan Carl Langer. Vincent Burke Lee. Dennis John Mannion. James Augustine St. Cyr. Martin Joseph Sullivan. Edward James Wolfendale. And in memory, Juan Carlos Luis, Army.
Roll call. KIA, North Andover. Specialist 4, Michael Joseph Byron. Lance Corporal, Gregory Chalmers Davis. Sergeant, Michael Roy Dunn. Spec 4, James Patrick English. From the town of Oxford, Lance Corporal James Leonard Melvin. Thank you.
North Reading. Specialist 4, Daniel David Callahan. Lance Corporal Jimmy Michael Kudo. Sergeant Eugene Raymond Moron. In memory, Daniel A. Denny III Coast Guard. Joseph Murata Coast Guard. John Raymond Gallant Marines. Robert W. Russo Army. Edward Earl Stephens Army. Paul A. Valley Air Force.
From the town of Reading, let us never forget Peter Malcolm Bradbury, Robert James Croce, John William Hanscom, Michael Dennis Haddle, Robert Allen Holt, Bruce Carlton Parmalee, and Edward Allen Putnam.
Stoneham, Massachusetts. First Lieutenant Joseph Timothy Campbell. Sergeant Joseph Carmen Cerrone Jr. Chief Warrant Officer Paul Robert Moran. Chief Warrant Officer George Clifton Schultz Jr. Spec 4 James English. Tech Sergeant Richard Fitzgibbons Jr. and Richard Fitzgibbons III. In memory, John Henry Barrett, U.S. Army. Robert Hepburn Yancey, U.S. Air Force. Rest in peace.
Present to the 45, present. Order, fire alarm. Present to the 45, present. Fire alarm. Fire. Recover, Lyman Road. Present to the 45, present. Recover.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Michael Gilberto, Town Administrator for the Town of North Reading, and I'll be serving as your Master of Ceremonies this evening. On behalf of the Town of North Reading, the North Reading Select Board, Director of Veteran Services Susan Magner, and the North Reading Parks and Recreation Department, welcome to Ipswich River Park, and welcome to North Reading. We're excited to be here this evening for this ceremony as part of the Visit of the Wall That Heals. A special welcome to our honored guests seated to my right and left, and to those of you who are visiting North Reading today. We're here this evening to honor our Vietnam veterans, Gold Star families, and in-memory families. We're also here in reverent appreciation of the sacrifice made by the thousands of veterans whose names are on the 3/4 scale replica of the wall which stands in the field behind me. Some of you were here last night, and once again this evening we're fortunate to be blessed with beautiful weather. I'd like to ask Director of Veteran Services Susan Magner to come forward to introduce the presentation of colors. Susan?
Good evening, everybody. If you could possibly all stand if you're able while we have our colors presented by the United States Army National Guard. By the United States Marine Corps. By the United States Marine Corps. And by the United States Coast Guard. Please remain standing while country singer Ayla Brown performs our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free
Thank you. Thank you. Please remain standing. I'd now like to introduce the Most Reverend Mark O'Connell to offer an invocation. Bishop Mark is the Vicar General, Regional Bishop for the North Region of the Archdiocese of Boston, and also the pastor of St. Teresa's Roman Catholic Church here in North Reading. Bishop Mark?
On behalf of all the clergy of North Reading, we say to you, wonderful veterans, thank you for your service. Gracious God in heaven, we invoke your name tonight as we remember those who gave their lives for our country, that we might live in freedom. Some 58,000 names are written here, and we pray for each of them and their families, and for others who came home who were never the same and have since fallen. Comfort all veterans here. Remember the war in Vietnam and other wars. Be with those who still fight the battles in their dreams. Help us all pay our great respect to these brave men and women who are so memorialized in this stunning wall. We also pray for the brave men and women who protect us at home and abroad today. They stand tall so that we might make this prayer in peace. Let us not take this peace, this freedom for granted. Let us honor them with our prayers. And for all who perished in war, eternal rest grant unto them, and let perpetual light shine upon them. Amen.
Please be seated. I'd now like to introduce Select Board Member Richard Wallner to offer remarks on behalf of the North Reading Select Board. Rich is in his first term on the board, serves as a member of the Council on Aging and North Reading Social Services Action Team, and previously served as a member of the Economic Development Committee and Economic Strategy Working Group. Rich also helped establish North Reading Senior Action Team. Please welcome Select Board Member Rich Wallner.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. As the newest member of the Select Board, I am honored to speak on behalf of my senior colleagues. So let me begin with expressing our sincere gratitude to those who have made this all happen today. We are very grateful to Sue Magner, our Director of Veteran Services, for advocating, securing, and organizing this important multi-day event. Your efforts, Susan, will be cherished by all that attend. Thank you so much. We are grateful to the departments and committees in towns who were called upon to help. Parks and Rec, Police and Fire, and the Wall That Heals Committee. Without your willing support, this event would not have been possible. We are grateful to the many volunteers who have stepped up to provide the assistance Susan needed to do the hard work of setup and tear down, plus many tasks in between. Your efforts are greatly appreciated by all. Thank you. And we would be remiss not to acknowledge the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, which provides the replica we see here today. The wall is dedicated to honor the courage, sacrifice, and devotion to duty and country of all who answered the call to serve during one of the most divisive wars in U.S. history. The VVFM further states that by separating the issue of individuals serving in the military from U.S. policies at the time, we are better able to continue a national effort of healing and reconciliation for these often overlooked veterans. More on that later. And finally, we are especially grateful to all of you. All of you have taken the time tonight to visit and learn about the Vietnam War, and especially to acknowledge those in attendance who served in Vietnam and those who are family or friends of those who never made it out of Vietnam or who have already passed. We welcome you with open arms. Now, throughout this event, you will hear the phrase welcome home and the word healing a lot. And honestly, I had to really do a little homework to figure out what that was all about. So why these words? What is the meaning behind the words? Let's make the past present. Let me paint a picture for you, especially for those who are not alive to witness it, of what things were like 50 years ago in 1969, a seminal moment in time, both at home and abroad. On the home front, oh, somebody want to answer the phone? That's a call from 1969. Okay, well, we'll just let it go. I think it's on the stand here. Okay, let's make the past the present. On the home front, U.S. citizens were still feeling the effects of prior and continuing social unrest and upheaval. For example, the Cold War with the Soviet Union, where hiding under a desk to avoid nuclear bombs was as routine as doing fire drills in the schools today. The civil rights movement of the early 60s and the devastating assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and the Reverend Martin Luther King. At the same time, the young people of 1969 were part of an exploding baby boom generation from the post-World II generation that were redefining culture in America in historic ways. From dress to music to politics, this new generation, in sheer volume alone, was challenging social norms on every level. Under the mantra of questioned authority mixed with peace and love, nothing was immune from its scrutiny, including the military and the government. Nowhere was the intent of this new generation better on display than at Woodstock this very weekend, 50 years ago to the day, when over 400,000 young people gathered on farmland to celebrate music and arts in peace and harmony. This singular event helped to define the baby boom generation with the effects that are still being felt to the day. With all of these often conflictual societal forces playing out at home in 1969, nothing could mask the undercurrent effects of the Vietnam War, not even the first landing and walk on the moon that also occurred during the summer 50 years ago. But how did we get involved in Vietnam in the first place? It all started in the 1920s when Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam decided to go to Russia to be trained in communism as a way to free the country up from French colonialism. Moving fast forward to 1947, President Truman recognized an emerging threat of communism throughout the world and promised that the U.S. would assist any country that resists communism. This doctrine became challenged in 1954 when the Soviet Union and China decided to support North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, and communism, while the USA supported South Vietnam and democracy. And with that, the U.S. became involved with the Vietnam conflict. And the timeline goes quickly. In 1959, the U.S. military experienced its first casualty. In 1961, the Green Berets were sent in to conduct covert secret operations against the Viet Cong. By 1964, we officially declared war and led the effort with extensive bombing attacks. At the same time, our first pilot is captured and taken as a POW. By 1965, the Marines are the first ground troops to enter the conflict, followed soon after by the Army, with thousands upon thousands of foot soldiers going into South Vietnam, totaling 3 million over the entire war period. By 1969, we had reached a peak of over 500,000 troops on the ground, with a casualty count of well over 47,000 troops. People of all ages in the USA at that time were beginning to experience the full impact of Vietnam involvement over the many years, including high casualty counts that were touching every community in America, combined with increasingly conflicting military reports and government policies that were concerning for most America. Riots and huge civilian protests were common at many major cities based on the suspicion that the U.S. government and military was not being transparent with the American people. Lo and behold, with the release of the top-secret Department of Defense Pentagon Papers in 1971 by the New York Times, confirmed the suspicions of many Americans. Safe to say, 1969 was a seminal moment in American history on so many fronts. The conflicts at home were everywhere. But nowhere in my mind did all the stresses, paradoxes, conflicts, tragedies, and beauty of the day come together more than when Jimi Hendrix, not Country Joe and the Fish, but Jimi Hendrix crushed it at Woodstock, when he performed a solo rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner that both respected our traditional U.S. patriotic anthem with guitar virtuosity beyond compare, while also interspersing the conflict of war with sonic volleys of sound that mimicked the sounds of gun and chaos from the battlefield and at home. So with this mental picture fresh in our minds of the scene of 1969, we can now better understand what coming home and healing really means for the Vietnam veteran. There was no hero welcome parades for the survivors of Vietnam or for those who were killed or missing. There was no acknowledgement that these surviving vets had just buried 58,000 of their closest friends. There was not even an acknowledgement that these survivors might be feeling tremendous guilt for just being alive and safe at home. Can you imagine you answer the call to service, you put your life on the line, and yet you receive little or no recognition or praise upon your return because of political and policy conflicts? Of course not. And for many of the veterans, this only led to more difficulties for them as they eventually suffered from a wide range of ailments, both mentally and physically. But now, 50 years later, this wonderful exhibit, this healing wall, is intended to allow us all to re-welcome those who served and perished in a decisive war with open hearts and minds in an honorable way that was just not available 50 years ago. This healing is being done through education and through community gatherings, just like we are doing here today. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for helping to rewrite the past, and thank you for being a part of this important process. Welcome home.
Thank you, Rich. Our next speaker is North Reading's own State Representative Brad Jones. Representative Jones has been a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives since 1994, represents the 20th Middlesex District, and has served as Minority Leader of the House since 2003. Prior to his state service, Representative Jones served in multiple offices for the town of North Reading, including as a selectman from 1993 to 1999. He has never forgotten that service and consistently advocates not only on statewide issues, but on issues that are critical to the town of North Reading directly. Most recently, working with State Senator Bruce Tarr, who was here last evening, he has continued to support of our veterans in North Reading and the state by securing $10,000 in state funding that will greatly assist North Reading in hosting the Wall That Heals. Please join me in welcoming State Representative Bradley H. Jones, Jr.
Thank you and good evening. It is truly a profound honor to join with the entire North Reading community for this special Welcome Home ceremony, honoring our Vietnam veterans and their fallen brothers and sisters. And a special thank you to North Reading's Veteran Service Officer, Susan Magner, for her tireless efforts and the countless hours spent making all this a reality. The names of 58,276 servicemen and women who were killed or went missing in action are inscribed on the official Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., and we are fortunate to be hosting the Wall That Heals replica of that memorial to our fallen soldiers. The 58,276 names represent stories of American heroes. Some are short, some are long. All are important, and all are heroes. One of those stories is about the father of a fellow North Reading class of 1983 graduate. His name is on panel E10, line 50. My classmate Keith never knew his father, but his father had such a profound effect on Keith that in our high school yearbook he wrote, and I quote, "Most of all to a man who held my absolute respect and love, a man I never knew, my father." Keith's father died in August of 1966, never knowing his son. There are over 58,000 other stories like that one on the wall. Whether they were drafted or volunteered, everyone whose name appears on the wall served our country and paid the ultimate sacrifice, and we must never forget. Our country was sharply divided during the Vietnam War, with many Americans actively demonstrating against the war and questioning why we were there. It was a time of tremendous social and political upheaval. Regrettably, that upheaval in opposition to the war was often misdirected at the men and women who served, and the soldiers returning to the States finding themselves either ignored or greeted with outright hostility by their fellow citizens. Anger at the war, or any war, should be directed at the politicians and the elected officials in Washington who were making the policy decision, and not at the thousands of men and women who placed themselves in harm's way to serve our nation. There were many casualties of the Vietnam War. In addition to the more than 58,000 soldiers who lost their lives, there were countless others who returned home bearing both the physical and emotional scars from the war, but were unable to find the support they needed and the appreciation they deserved. This memorial is known as the Wall That Heals, and it represents a chance to bring a sense of closure to a turbulent period in our nation's history. The Wall That Heals gives us all an opportunity to listen to the stories and learn about history. It provides each of us, in our own way, an opportunity to remember and an opportunity to show respect. Perhaps above all, it gives us a very special opportunity to do our small part in helping right a wrong that took place in this country decades ago, and to finally give our Vietnam veterans the welcome home they deserved but never received. On behalf of the entire North Reading community and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I want to thank all of our Vietnam veterans for their service and sacrifice and offer them a long overdue thank you for your service and welcome home.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Our next speaker will be Mr. Richard Stratton, who is regularly associated here in North Reading with North Reading's Minute Militia. Mr. Stratton is also a member of North Reading VFW Post 10874 and an appointed member of the town's Veterans Memorial and Veterans Events Committees. Mr. Stratton is a Vietnam veteran Marine and a member of a Gold Star family. He and his wife Linda reside here in North Reading. Please welcome Mr. Richard Stratton.
Michael. First, I want to thank Susan Magner for bringing the wall to North Reading. It was an unbelievable effort that she had put forward to bring it to us and to ask me to serve on the committee as well. And I appreciated being able to be a volunteer to help assemble this wall as well, and to actually meet some of the veterans that I had not met before that came to see the wall and listen to their stories. It is an extreme honor for me to be standing here today to represent Vietnam veterans of North Reading and all Vietnam veterans. And I thank Susan Magner and the committee for asking me to stand here today and share my thoughts with you. I am a combat veteran of Vietnam. I served in 2nd Battalion 1st Marines, 2nd Battalion 4th Marines in Vietnam. My period of time during Vietnam was 1965 and 1966. I spent 13 months there. Fortunately, I was fortunate to be able to return home without being wounded. I was in many conflicts and operations during that time. I'm not going to share any of the events or any of my experiences during that conflict, but I would like to share with you my experience once I returned home. Once we left Vietnam, we were put on a plane, a commercial airline, and we were brought to back to the United States, and we landed at LA Airport. They told us to report to a desk and check out. We'd been given our orders while we were in Vietnam, so we had them with us. So it took 5 minutes to check in. The day before, I was in combat in Vietnam. The next day, I was on the streets of LA, just released and became an ex-combat veteran. So it kind of astounded me at the time that the day before I'd been carrying a rifle in full gear, and I just 2 days before that, I'd just come up on an operation. And here I was standing in Hollywood. So I couldn't return home right away. I called my parents and I said, I have to decompress. So I said, I'll be home in a few days. So I checked into our local hotel, which I had actually hung out with before I went to Vietnam, and it was around near Disneyland. And I took off my uniform. Well, before I took it off, I went shopping. I went to a local store and I bought civilian clothes. I took off the uniform and I did not wear it again. That was because I wanted to put the Vietnam War behind me. Not that I wasn't proud of being a Marine or being a veteran of Vietnam. I still was a veteran in my heart, and I knew what I had did, and I knew that I had served. Pardon me. It is tough to do this because it brings back memories. I'll continue. Thank you. Where was I? So anyways, my parents, I had called my parents and I told them when I was going to arrive. So when I arrived in Logan, I got off the plane and all my family was there. And they expected me to get off the plane in my Marine Corps uniform. I was dressed in a suit. And the reason for that was because I wanted to assimilate back into civilian life right away, as soon as possible. And I guess I didn't appreciate the fact that my parents wanted to see me in my uniform. Actually, I had one more year to go in the Marine Corps once I get out, and so I made it up to them. When I came back from my training, after my hitch was up, I wore my dress blues, and so they were satisfied. I paid my tribute back to them. Pardon me. The other reason I'm here is because I have a foster brother on the wall. He is not with us. As a result, he's not able to be with us today. He's on panel 4E, line 81. His name is James Vincent Torresano. My mother was a foster parent. From the time I was 6 years old until the time I was 19 or 18, my mother took foster children from the home of the Little Wanderers in Jamaica Plain. Jimmy came to us when he was 13. So I got to know him as a foster brother and a best friend during the years from 13 through when we enlisted when we were 18. We went in on the buddy plan together. We went through boot camp together. We went through training together. We went up to California together to train to go to Vietnam. We went to Vietnam together. Unfortunately, we arrived in Vietnam in August of 1965. And we made helicopter assaults from an LPH, which is a converted aircraft carrier. We were together during all those conflicts. But unfortunately, I was transferred to the southern part of Vietnam to replace another unit who had lost a number of men. So we were separated. In January of 1966, Jimmy went out on a patrol. He was trained in California as in the language of Vietnam. So he used to go out on patrols occasionally and be an interpreter. This time it was during the Tet New Year, and it was supposedly a ceasefire. And so he went out on this patrol. And three soldiers, 3 Marines ahead of him, The third one, who was on point, stepped on a mine. And he was killed by concussion. He lasted 2 days. I didn't learn about his passing for a month because my parents did not want me to know. While I was still there, I still had another 6 or 8 months to go. So fortunately, I was not able to come home for his funeral because I did not know about it. But fortunately, they dedicated a square. He came from Everett. And they dedicated a square to him in June of 1966. So I'd like to put a face to the name that I just mentioned. He is not unlike a lot of the Marines that enlisted during that time and subsequently. But in addition, I would like to read a poem that he wrote in December of 1965, which reflects his feeling at the time about being in Vietnam. This is a poem called Christmas in Vietnam, 1965. It's by Lance Corporal James Vincent Torresano. It's come to Christmas this time this year. I doubt we'll see any snow down here. All we've got is blazing sands, scalding hot that burns our hands. No sounds of sleigh bells in the night. Not even a Christmas tree in sight. No sweet dreams run through our heads. A moment of slack could find us dead. No, old St. Nick won't find us here. The sand's too hot for his poor dear. They call us baby killers. Oh dear Lord, do we get coal for having done our job? We do what we must. It is no joy. Nor is my M14 a toy. You, the man with many a dollar, high school boy or college scholar, enjoy your Christmas while you can. Just don't forget that you're a man. The time of draft is low in flight. It may be you who's called to fight. But in the meantime, have no fear. Someone cares. That's why we're here. Rest in peace, Jim. I'll never forget you.
Thank you so much for that personal and heartfelt sharing of your involvement and your family's involvement, Mr. Stratton. Our honored guest speaker this evening is Secretary of the Department of Veterans Services and former Marine Francisco Urena. Secretary Urena served in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom as a tank commander. During a fight with insurgents, he was wounded and was subsequently awarded the Purple Heart. He served as the Veteran Services Officer for the City of Lawrence and Commissioner of Veteran Services for the City of Boston. In 2015, he was appointed Secretary of the Department of Veteran Services by Governor Charlie Baker, where he consistently plays an active role in helping veterans. He and his office have also worked closely with Veteran Services officers in cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Francisco Urena.
Thank you so very much, and what a true privilege it is to be here in North Reading for our purpose tonight, which is to recognize, to honor, and to remember. Sue, let me thank you so very much, first of all, for setting the tone, for taking the risk, for bringing together volunteers and bringing this wall to this beautiful town so that neighbors, residents, friends could memorialize, remember, recognize those 58,000 names of young men, women who did not have a chance to return home. So let me give you and your committee a great round of applause. Representative Jones and Town Manager, to all of the selectmen and to all you residents of North Reading, thank you for this opportunity. But today we're really here to recognize and to remember. And I want to take an opportunity, and I know we will so many times tonight, to thank our Vietnam veterans, our men and women who did return home and perhaps did not receive the welcome home that our generation had to receive. You know, you, like the Korean War veterans, did not receive that sense of welcome home, those parades, those opportunities that our World War II veterans received upon their return. But it was these men and women that in 1991 said, let's not welcome home the men and women of the Gulf War in ways that we didn't receive. So appreciation committees, yellow ribbons were tied around trees in places like North Reading, Massachusetts, so many other cities and towns because of the leadership of these men. Their resiliency, their opportunity, their connection to fare with what they experienced, not only on the battlefield, but also in cities and towns and streets and places across America. And so I want to give these men and women a great round of applause. And let me ask you, if you can, please stand so that we could truly see you, recognize you, and all the impact of all those who served in Vietnam and in support of the Vietnam War. Thank you very much. Whether you are a spouse or, in some cases, mothers of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans who are here present with us today, our Gold Star families are a very special breed. Their resiliency and their ability to continue to be among us and this ability to remember their loved ones is so very special. Linda Cafferty, who serves as the Vice President of the National Gold Star Wives of America, I want to thank you for your leadership in connecting so many families and making that bond and our partnership that much stronger. And so on behalf of our Governor, Charlie Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, 350,000 veterans that call Massachusetts home, our 220 veteran service officers who are in every city and town there to assist our veterans in the sense of transition, recognition, and integration into our communities. I truly want to thank you all and want to thank this great town of North Reading for welcoming this wall, being part of the committee, and making sure that throughout the 4 days that this wall is here, 24/7, accessibility to this wall remains. Because you see, there are those 56,000 names that are on this wall, 56,000 memories of so many who knew them, families who knew them before they were in the service. And it is sometimes in the late hours of the night that these walls become visited by so many Vietnam veterans that want to have that private moment away from the crowds in their own way to grieve. And I leave you with an announcement that some of you all may know. Just last month, we broke ground in Fall River, building a 3/4 replica of this same wall in the city of Fall River, so that we don't have to wait for this wall to return to cities and towns around us. But more importantly, is an opportunity that in Massachusetts, there'll be a replica of all of those who served and sacrificed in Vietnam to be visited, but more importantly, to serve as a point of education for our young students and young kids to know, and so that those names do not become forgotten. Once again, thank you so very much. God bless you all, and thank you for your service. Welcome home, Vietnam vets.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Secretary Urena. Our second honor guest speaker is Command Chief Master Sergeant Michelle O'Keefe of the U.S. Air National Guard. Command Chief Master Sergeant Michelle O'Keefe is Command Chief Master Sergeant for the Massachusetts Air National Guard located at Hanscom Air Force Base, Massachusetts. She's responsible for the management of 2,000 airmen throughout the state that are geographically separated at 2 wings and 1 headquarters. Chief O'Keefe originally joined the Massachusetts Air National Guard in '92. Her first assignment was with the 102nd Fighter Wing, where she served as a personnel specialist. Please join me in welcoming Command Chief Master Sergeant Michelle O'Keefe.
Good evening. What a beautiful night it is for this event, maybe a little too hot. I apologize, I worked really hard to try and get a flyover for tonight, but unfortunately it didn't work out with our flying schedules. But it would have been an awesome ending to this ceremony to have an F-15 fly overhead. I'd first like to also thank Susan Magner, all the volunteers and organizations that worked so hard to bring this to our community, and to our community for coming out tonight and supporting our Vietnam veterans. I would especially like to thank our Gold Star families, our in-memory families, and our Vietnam veterans who are here with us. I am honored to be part of this special event. As a lifelong resident of North Reading, the State Command Chief for the Massachusetts Air National Guard, and daughter of a Vietnam veteran, the wall that heals means a lot to me. As a young girl, I didn't know much about the Vietnam War, only what was taught in history class, which I probably didn't pay much attention in. My classmates here might attest to that. As many other veterans, my dad didn't speak too much about the war, as I would assume that the wounds were too deep. It wasn't until my senior year in high school when I decided to join the military on the long rides back and forth to the Cape that my dad would start to share stories of the war. But the real stories are saved for his brothers in arms. My dad served in Vietnam in the 119th Helicopter Assault Company between 1968 and 1969, and he is my hero. And he's out there. Love you, Dad. When I heard that the wall was coming to North Reading, I immediately wanted to sign up and volunteer. And then shortly after, I got appointed as the State Command Chief for Massachusetts. And I received a call from Sue Magner asking me to be one of her honored guests tonight, and I couldn't be more proud. Then I did what I always do, and I called my dad for some advice. I told him that I wanted to be able to connect to the audience. He said he'd have to give it some thought. So he called me back a few days later and said that he'd like me to do some reading on the way that Vietnam veterans were treated when they returned home from the war. You see, of all the things that he could have shared with me, that was the most important to him for me to know. For me, in my generation, I wear this uniform every day. And not a day goes by that someone doesn't stop me and thank me for my service, buy me a coffee, or pick up my tab at lunchtime. And part of me does not feel worthy. They deserved the respect, the welcome home parades, and the thanks for their service. I realized that the wall that heals is the closest we will ever come to connecting and repairing the unnecessary wounds placed upon you. And that the bond that you share is unlike no others. There are no words I can say to connect to you. All I can say is thank you for your service and welcome home. I'd like to conclude by reading you a poem, To the Wall, written through the eyes and soul of Bill Damaris from Fall River, United States Marine Corps Sergeant who served in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969. To the wall. Our hair was thin and balding, our stomachs heavy and round. Some of us limped and some wheezed as our feet hit the ground. We moved forward, slowly at first, as if on a sweep for mines, each of us making the journey to a moment back in time. Then the wall rose before us, black marbled end to end, and each of us began looking, searching for a brother, for a friend. Our emotions spilled with memories from those days so long ago of firefights and brothers in arms, most we didn't know. Then they spoke to us, our brothers etched in stone. They told us to be proud, stand tall, and welcome home. They said, together we swore an oath to serve and did not hesitate or ask why. All of us did our duty, knowing full well we could die. And now we, Vietnam veterans, the wall's forever chiseled names, encourage you to live your life without regret or shame. We were killed in action in Nam's jungles long ago, but we will always walk beside you wherever you may go. Be proud you served with honor, and don't hesitate to say, you answered America's call to arms. You did not run away. And to America, we have but one request. May this granite wall remind you, Vietnam veterans gave their very best.
Thank you, Command Chief Master Sergeant O'Keefe, for those remarks. At this time, I'd like to welcome back to the podium North Reading Director of Veteran Services, Susan Magner, to preside over the honoring of our veterans, Gold Star families, and in-memory honorees. Susan?
It is my pleasure to, excuse me, it's been my voice, I'm losing it. I'm going to roll call the Vietnam veterans. I'm going to roll call 5 at a time. And it is my hope that I can get Command Chief Master Sergeant Michelle O'Keefe, as well as Secretary Urena. And in the audience, I also have one of my VSO's buddies over here. I have Jamie Melendez out of Lawrence. And we will alphabetically call you up. And as we do, if you could just stand, and then we will then do a photo of all of you together, it would be greatly appreciated. And because we have so many, I just wanted to point something out. I know there's the gifts that we're going to give, in addition to being pinned. I know I have several. The veterans in North Reading have already received coffee mugs, so I'm kind of like limited on them. So I do have all the, but the guts of what's in the coffee mug for those that already have a coffee mug. So just let me know so that we can make sure the ones that didn't get one will have one as well. Okay? So, the first set of 5. Mark Abels, U.S. Air Force. May not have been able to make it tonight. Paul Ashman, U.S. Air Force. Michael Barker, U.S. Army. Carl Bertolino, U.S. Army. Arthur Cole, U.S. Army. Paul Connolly, U.S. Army. Gentlemen, if you could stay over here so we can take your picture as a group. Mr. Ashman. John Crooker, U.S. Air Force. Carl Cummings, U.S. Marine Corps. Michael Curran, U.S. Army. Bill DePremio, U.S. Army. Al DeSalvo, U.S. Coast Guard. Bruce Dobson, U.S. Air Force. Paul Dorsey, U.S. Army. Donald Fahey, U.S. Marine Corps. Paul Fillmore, U.S. Navy. Bob Follett, U.S. Army. The next one is, excuse me, was a special pin pinning for Rich Giordano by Marty Tilton, our Parks Director. Jim Guilfoyle, U.S. Army. Jay Gurry, U.S. Army. Ed Harrison, U.S. Navy. Mike Hennessy, U.S. Navy. James Keck, U.S. Army. Wally Langle, U.S. Army. Eric Leckberg, U.S. Navy. Robert Lennon, U.S. Marine Corps. Mark Lucantonio, U.S. Navy. Joe Macarone, U.S. Army. Jim McLaughlin, U.S. Navy. Lawrence Mahoney, U.S. Air Force. Jerry Pelletier, U.S. Navy. John Richard, U.S. Marine Corps. Marty Robichaud, U.S. Army. John Roberts, U.S. Marine Corps. Steve Schuler. Steve Schuler. Sorry, guys. U.S. Army. Rich Stratton, U.S. Marine Corps. Howard Swenson, U.S. Air Force.
George Thomas, U.S. Army. Peter Thomas, United States Marine Corps. Gordon Thornton, United States Coast Guard. Paul Thornton, United States Army. Armin Trano, United States Marine Corps. Joe Vino, United States Coast Guard. John Watson, United States Marines. Jim Waters, United States Air Force. John Wise, United States Navy. Now, if there are any other Vietnam veterans who did not get recognized by name, please do come up, join us, and let us provide you this pin. Behind the pin, there is an inscription, and it does say Vietnam War veteran. A grateful nation thanks you and honors you. To all of the Vietnam veterans here who have received and are receiving this pin, do wear this pin with honor and with pride, as we are proud of you. Do share the story of what it means to be a Vietnam veteran, or what it means to have this pin when asked, and do keep it as an heirloom, as a token of recognition to those in your families and in your friendships. All right, Vietnam vets, I know you probably, it's been a while since you stood in formation. So we want to take a picture so as close as possible to one another. Do stand, and these photographers want to memorialize this event and this opportunity to have you all together.
Al, you're too short.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
In this very special time, we want to recognize the sacrifice of our Gold Star families here in attendance. So I will now call our Gold Star families to the podium by name. Linda Solomini Cafferty, Gold Star wives. Ralph Basilieri, for Ralph Basilieri Jr., United States Marine Corps. Bob Bronson, for William F. Bronson Jr., United States Marine Corps. Linda Gambino Baxter, for Michael Gambino, United States Army. Miss Beverly Collins, for Harold S. Park Jr., United States Army. Gene Richard Thompson, for William Thompson, United States Army. Georgia Callahan, in honor of Mark Doyle, for Georgia Callahan and March Doyle, for George Callahan, United States Army. The plight and the sacrifice of our Vietnam veterans was not just made in soils in places like Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, but it was also made after returning home and because of their wounds of service-connected. So the next group, what we like to call, is families who have lost loved ones due to service-connected disabilities. And to assist is Cody, son of D. Whitmore Ferris, for Everett Ferris Jr. Mary Dennehy, in honor of Daniel Dennehy, United States Marine Corps. Kathy Franciolo, in honor of Joseph Franciolo, United States Marine Corps. Elaine Savage and Diane Crownwell, in honor of Charles Savage, United States Army. Lori Sousa, in honor of Mike Zimmerman, United States Army. Leah Stevens, in honor of Edward Stevens, United States Army. David, in honor of Gerald Kincaid Jr., United States Army. Do we want to pause for any more that have been called? Oh, David, If we have any other Gold Star families in the audience who have not been recognized, please do join us and do share the name of your loved one.
Everett F. Ferris Jr., Pleiku, Vietnam, Lynn, Massachusetts.
Thank you very much.
Anybody from the back rows?
May we have another round of applause in honor of all of our Vietnam veterans, Gold Star families, and in memory and families of survivors.
We're all humbled to bear witness to the honor and respect that we've provided in the ceremony that's just been bestowed. Thank you all for participating. I ask that we all please stand, if you're able, for the volley firing by North Reading Minute Militia, followed by the playing of taps. I'd like to thank all of our participants for making this evening's ceremonies an honorable tribute to our Vietnam veterans. A special thank you to Director of Veteran Services Susan Magner, Parks and Recreation Operations Director Maureen Stevens. Please be seated. Parks and Recreation Operations Director Maureen Stevens, and Parks Director Marty Tilton for arranging for this wonderful venue for this week's events. Please join me in a round of applause to say thank you. Thank you all to our guest and honored guest speakers this evening. Finally, thank you to Senator Bruce Tarr, Representative Brad Jones, and the countless businesses and individuals, including some of you here this evening, who contributed funds to the North Reading Veterans Gift Account to make this week's events possible. Please join me in a round of applause to say thank you. This concludes this evening's ceremony. Please join us tomorrow evening at 6:00 p.m. for a candlelight vigil and for a United States Navy ceremonial concert. Thank you to our veterans for their service. Thank you all for joining us, and may God bless America.